Hey folks, B59 here. Welcome back to episode 41 of our Piasa Transport playthrough of Transport Fever 2. And I think we may be, and in fact, I'm going to make the decision we are approaching the end of this series. We've been holed up in the year 1885 for many years now, because that was when the Frontenac came on board as a steamboat, and it was the closest steamboat I could find to those that actually ran on the Mississippi River at this time. It was in fact not a Mississippi River steamboat. It was a boat that was used on lakes in New York, but it was the closest looking to what we saw here on the Mississippi River. And the kind of glorious age of steamboats on the Mississippi River was the period from the 1820s or so through around 1850. And really, actually, we've been at 1885. If I said 1855, I meant 1885. And really, by 1885, the era of steamboats had kind of was dying out. It hadn't entirely passed, but it was dying out. And we've heard that from Mark Twain in the readings that we've included here from his book, Life on the Mississippi. And in that book, he described a trip that he took down the Mississippi River on a steamboat in the early 1880s. And he used it to reminisce about his time back in the 50s, I think it was, when he was a riverboat pilot, right then in the glorious age of the steamboats. But he also talked about the decline of steamboats on the Mississippi, the factors that led to that, the use of trains, the use of barges, the great interruption of the U.S. Civil War. And at this point, that era kind of ends. So, thinking of that, and by the way, the other thing is that the extent of the network, we've actually gone, I think, beyond what was really the Mississippi River network in its prime. The real focus was between St. Louis and New Orleans and up the Ohio River and some of the other major tributaries. But it didn't really go up north that much, although later years it did, but the real focus was really between New Orleans and St. Louis. And so we've really completed, I think, the purpose we set out to accomplish in this playthrough, and that is to explore that golden era of steamboats. It's something that doesn't get explored very often in Transport Fever. I don't know if I'm aware of any other playthrough that I've ever seen anyway that really focuses on river transport. And there are a lot of challenges that we encountered along the way. The rivers are kind of narrow, the boats ghost through each other. It's hard to get harbors that fit within the size of the river. There's a lot of challenges. But on the other hand, we made it work. It paid off. We have a very successful river transport network. We have a few trains, but they're mostly in support of that river transport. And it's been a lot of fun. So I've enjoyed it, but I do think that after we complete this ops review in New Orleans, which we're going to do today, and then complete Eliza's punch list, I think it's time to close this series. I may end up doing one more episode after that, which is basically a flyby of our network and just taking a look at it from one end to the other, all in one episode. We'll see about that. In any event, though, let's rejoin Eliza, and she's meeting today with the operations manager in New Orleans, and together they are going to review the operations and figure out what's on her punch list to accomplish next. And it's kind of nice sitting here because as we kind of conclude this opening segment, in comes a riverboat to drop off passengers in New Orleans. One of the things that I've noticed with the New Orleans passenger service is that it really doesn't get a lot of traffic. You can see there aren't very many people here on the harbor, on the dock, waiting to be picked up. And this boat is not likely to let off many people either. And the reason for that is that there's a very efficient and quicker tram service that runs from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. And I think most passengers find it quicker and easier just to take the tram service if they're going to Baton Rouge. And even if they're connecting on to other places on the Mississippi River, it's likely to be faster that way than taking the ferry boats or the steamboats. So, Eliza is going to start today by thinking about that tram service. And now, as she looks over the city of New Orleans, she sees that it didn't have a lot of room for growth. It does have growth over across the river. There wasn't much space for it to grow to the south, but it has pushed out a fair amount to the north. And so when she sees this, she sees that the furthest north tram route today, or tram stop, is here on Ridge Street. And so there's quite a bit up here that is not really getting supported very well. And so her first finding then today in her ops review is that the New Orleans has expanded to the north and it needs more tram stops. So she's going to extend the tram line up here to the north or recommend that. And she's also going to recommend that the manager consider a more robust station up here to the north. There's basically 3 lines coming into here, this very active line between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, as well as the 2 clockwise and counterclockwise lines for the intercity tram service in New Orleans. So it may be that we'll want to put a station. There's not a lot of room for that up here, but it might be the thing to do. It could go here, it could go here, but it'll knock out a lot of buildings if we do put it there. So she's going to leave that up to the branch manager, and that'll be on her punch list and for him to work out next time. The next thing that she decides to take a look at is just the trams themselves. It looks like they're not that they're keeping relatively busy, half full or almost half full on the counterclockwise line. And when she checks out the clockwise line, she sees that it also is maintaining about that rate. But she does notice that the streetcars on the clockwise run are the older variety. So she's going to recommend, in keeping up with the image of Piasa transport, if not the absolute need, she's going to recommend that those streetcars be upgraded. She's also takes a look at the deliveries of goods here in New Orleans, and what she sees is that New Orleans requires goods and machines, and it's getting neither. However, she does not really see a really strong opportunity for a network to bring those into New Orleans, or at least not a real river transport network. The one of them, let's see, which is it? Is it the machines or the goods? The goods requires chemicals, or plastic rather. And honestly, while New Orleans does make plastic and we could send it up here to Dallas, which is probably the most likely, there's not really that great of a river network to support that. She'd have to go from Dallas over here to Shreveport and then bring it on down, which is a possibility. And there also aren't any good sources of logs and planks, which the machines factory requires. So these plastics are ahead of time, really, for 1885, and there aren't any planks in the vicinity that really could be used to supply this. The Jackson sawmill is already busy supplying tools to the Vicksburg Tools Factory, and it's full up on that. Conceivably, they could come from Montgomery. But at that point, we're really going pretty far from the real soul of this playthrough, which is all around the river transport. And also, we're going outside the arrow with the chemicals, or the plastics, rather. So, we're not going to supply New Orleans. It's kind of stunted New Orleans' growth not to have any goods, but those are the reasons why we've done it, and I think we're going to stick to that for the remainder of this playthrough. The next thing she takes a look at is the New Orleans Industrial Wharf. And this is really geared to be supplying refined oil to the fuel refinery and to bringing the refined fuel back up to Shreveport and Tulsa. And it has two lines coming in to it today to support those. There's a little bit of a backlog here, and she takes a look at that because this barge and this barge are having to wait while this barge goes in and unloads. But what is not clear is if that is going to be remedied, because we recently added in the last episode a bunch of boats to those lines, and so sometimes they all get pushed out at once and then they start backing up, and it might be that is the issue here. We're certainly able to keep up. It's not that we're running out of dock space, but it does make me wonder if we could get away with maybe adding one more smaller dock to support Shreveport. We see today, for instance, the Shreveport line only arrives every 4 minutes and it has a rate of 200. The New Orleans Tulsa line runs every 142 seconds, so about every 2 minutes, every 2 months. And it has a rate of 359. It's supposed to be getting up closer to 400. But it probably could stand having its own dock, and maybe the larger dock. So she is going to recommend that this New Orleans Industrial Wharf be reconfigured to support 2 different docks for 2 different lines. So that's going to be on our list, so we will have the fun of redesigning a harbor in our next episode. The next area, and this is a fairly challenging area that is within the New Orleans branch manager's remit, is Lake Charles. And Lake Charles has a fair amount going on here. It does have a passenger service that is taking folks in and out of Lake Charles, has a passenger train. It has a shunt, as we've called it, that carries 3 different types of cargo: grain, bricks, and food. And then up in Lake Charles itself, we have a food processing plant, which is a major food processing plant that is serving 4 different consumers. And then within Lake Charles itself, we have a couple of different transport systems. So first of all, she takes a look first at this, is the bus service. And when she looks at it, she sees moderately decent coverage, but it doesn't feel quite adequate for a growing town like Lake Charles is. Lake Charles has grown 130%. If it gets its goods up, it could grow even more. And right now it's a pretty long walk for some of these residents to get to the train station. And so she thinks that if they were to build this bus service out a bit more, it would encourage all kinds of additional traffic on the Piasa transport systems. It'll drive more train traffic, it'll drive more ferry, steamboat traffic. So her recommendation here is to extend the bus routes in Lake Charles. She also takes a look at the delivery system in Lake Charles, and we have one line she sees that is delivering both bricks and food. At the moment it's able to keep up, but that it's only able to keep up with what it's getting. It's really not able to keep up with what is actually demanded by the residents. In fact, it's only about halfway there. And let's see what the reach looks like here. The reach is pretty good. How does it look compared to actual demand? Yeah, this drop-off is adequate. It is connecting all of the demand that's required. It's just not getting enough delivery. So one component of that is to make sure that this delivery line has a rate that's it's got to be at least double that, 54 and 57. So it has to be about double what it is today. So she's going to recommend that that more truck lines be added to that delivery route. So that takes care of the local traffic, but let's take a look as well at what's going on here at the food processing plant. So we're shipping 100% of what we create, and we're getting supplied from 2 farms, but those 2 farms are only sending us a total of 400 grain, which turns into 200 food. And we know that Vicksburg, Vicksburg, let's just take a look. Vicksburg wants 115 food. Baton Rouge, it's supplied in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge wants 118 food. Jackson wants 108 food. And Lake Charles itself, we know, wants 57 food. So we need to get this up to 400 production. And the only way we're going to do that is to connect more farms and get more grain coming in here. And this creates a couple of challenges that she sees. And that is finding the farms to supply the grain. There's this farm here, so that's a possibility. But there are no other nearby farms. So she's going to task her branch manager with doing a bit of scouting. And we may end up having to go into sandbox mode. But she's going to task him to find another farm so that we can bring the production into this food processing plant to supply all of its consumers. And that's going to have a ripple-on effect as well. Principally, not only on the river transport that we're going to need to add to support that, but also on this train line, which today is overloaded. This shunt is overloaded. It's just not able to keep up with the demand. We have 207 bricks waiting, 99 food waiting, and there's so much grain, and there's so many cargo here that the station can't hold it all. So the trains are going to need to be upgraded to be able to accommodate more cargo. And it's probably going to be a fairly significant embiggening, because the problem with this train system is that it has to have 3 different kinds of carriages to carry all the goods. So it needs a flat car. Let's just take a look at this one right here. It needs a flat car for the bricks. It needs a box car for the food. And it needs gondolas for the grain. So balancing all of those and figuring out how we're going to get enough additional carriages on here to manage that is going to be a task. And she's going to leave that to the branch manager as well, because when she was a branch manager, that was her problem. But now that she's the chief operating officer for Piasa Transport, it's not her problem to figure out how to make these things happen. Her problem is to identify where there's things that need to be solved and to tell the branch managers to fix them. So that's what she's going to do. That's what she's going to do here. The passenger line itself between the station on the river and Lake Charles itself seems to be pretty adequate at the moment. It's carrying 11 of 32. If we can increase more traffic coming in by increasing the transport here in Lake Charles, that will probably put a little more pressure on it. But it seems like there's plenty of room at the moment to manage that. So that one she's going to leave alone. And she's going to ask the branch manager to instead focus on the cargo shop. So as Eliza concludes her ops review here in New Orleans, she finds herself on the harbor again, waiting for her ride back up the river, and unsurprisingly, she finds herself again with her friend Samuel Clemens. And he of course, shares his thoughts with her, as he always does, and he tells her about his view on New Orleans. He says, the old French part of New Orleans, anciently the Spanish part, bears no resemblance to the American end of the city. The American end, which lies beyond the intervening brick business center. The houses are massed in blocks, are austerely plain and dignified, uniform of pattern, with here and there a departure from it with a pleasant effect. All are plastered on the outside, and nearly all have long iron-railed verandas running along the several stories. Their chief beauty is the deep, warm, varicolored stain with which time and the weather have enriched the plaster. It harmonizes with all the surrounding and has as natural look of belonging there as has the flush upon sunset clouds. This charming decoration cannot be successfully imitated, neither is it to be found elsewhere in America. With that, folks, we will leave Eliza and Samuel to rejoin their journey up the river this time. And thank you for joining me and Eliza and Samuel, and I will see you next time.